I would never give up my ability to cry in society without somebody judging me because I'm a man or because, and so I think we really undermine two things here. One, the value and power that women have that we're not recognizing because it's not traditional in the sense of like, it's not financial or political power. And the second thing is I think we're really undermining the power that women have that men don't have in this society, which is the ability to have deep emotional connections with one another. It's the ability to process our emotions openly that we don't allow men to do in the society.
Better Than Rich show listener, you are in for a treat with Dr. Rebecca Heiss. And I will tell you, she has an awesome book called Instinct. And we go in a lot of different directions with Rebecca's fearless message. We talk about everything from women empowerment to masculine and man empowerment. We talk about meditation, manifestation. Andrea asked a great question around manifestation. I really loved her answer. We even get into a topic about crows for the first time on the Better Than Rich Show podcast. So I thought it was a really stimulating conversation. I think you'll love her energy and her content, her wisdom. As a former educator, she's an expert when it comes to evolutionary biology, and she's a stress expert. She even has an offer for you, listener, and she told us that you're going to get 25% off of her course. So the promo will be Better Than Rich. She tells you about it at the end, but she told us offline that she's going to give 25% off her course. So if you want to take her up on that, drrebeccaheiss.com and use the promo code Better Than Rich for a 25% discount. So Andrew, what would you say? I know I'm just kind of ranting over here because I really loved the episode. What were some things for you and highlights for you before we get into it?
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, I think you guys are going to notice just how fun this conversation was. Very much an open book and very authentic. And we just had a blast having this conversation. I think you're going to have a blast listening to it. You're going to learn all about stress, about fear, about fight or flight, and we even get into the topic of freeze. So there's all sorts of different directions that we go. I know you're going to love it. So let's get on with the show with Dr. Rebecca Heiss.
Welcome back to the Better Than Rich show. I'm Mike Abramowitz. I'm here with Andrew Biggs, and we have Dr. Rebecca Heiss on the show today. Welcome to the show, Dr. Rebecca Heiss.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Mike and Andrew, for having me. And it's just Rebecca from here on out. Thank you.
Okay. Well, yeah. Just Rebecca, we'll go with it. But you earned the doctor, so we got to plug it in there.
I appreciate that. I always do. Yep.
Well,
but listen, titles are titles, right? At the end of the day.
Well, some people don't feel that way. Some people say, hey, I worked my ass off to earn this title, and I'd like to be called by this title. So,
nothing but respect for him. Yep. And then there's people like me where I think the degree is buried in a file cabinet somewhere. I think I can find it for y'all. But
so why do you think that is? Why is that not a significant thing for you? Let's dig right in. Why do you feel that you worked your ass off for these letters that go in front of your name, but yet it's like, there's a degree somewhere else. I don't really need the title. Just call me Rebecca. Why do you think that is? But yet some people are like, call me doctor, please.
Gosh, that's a huge question. And I don't want to insult anybody because this is just my personal, do it. I like the challenge. To me, I think the more we demonstrate that we are experts in the field, the less we're actually experts. When we get into that space and we lose curiosity and we, have achieved the doctorate or the highest level of education, sometimes that's when people like hang up their towel and they're like, all right, I've done it. Just call me doctor from now on. I'm going to sit back here and take all the questions. And to me, I don't want to get into that mindset, right? I always want to stay curious and hungry and diving into the conversation. Plus, I feel like it puts a barrier between me and people. Like, I don't want people to think that I'm super smart because I have, doctor. I'm stubborn more than anything. I'm stubborn. I'm persistent for sure. I'm just a human, right? Like everybody else, there's celebrities out there. I don't see them as anything special. I don't see doctors as anybody special. I see us as humans. So that's my take on it. I don't know.
Well, I love the authenticity that you're bringing. I love the energy that you're bringing. I can already tell this is going to be a fun episode, Rebecca. So I'm
We'll
excited to
see.
dive in.
Cool.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree, but if the last few years have taught me anything, it's that I should always trust doctors and expert opinions, and I should outsource all my decision making and thinking to experts who are in their ivory towers. That's my personal take on the last few years, and it's very
Oh
hard to
yeah.
disagree with that. Very
Yeah.
clear. Yeah.
I'm not going to say I disagree with that. Like, look, I think I'm smart. You know, I think
You should disagree with that.
Right?
You should 100% disagree with that.
Anyway, I don't want to go down too far down that rabbit hole. Okay,
We could. It'd be fun.
let me do the. I'll do everyone a favor. I'll get the train back on the track. Because
Oh.
I have a question. Okay,
Yeah.
and it's something we were talking about ahead of this call, but we were talking about female empowerment. We're talking about
Yeah.
some of the things, some of the themes that you really like to hit on: stress, fear, women's leadership, and empowerment. Why we need to pay more attention to that, especially paying attention to men and getting them into the conversation with this. But the Barbie movie is, all the rage right now.
Yeah.
Had a really good opening weekend. This is probably coming out a few weeks into its run. I'm curious. You said you had a hot take on it, a spicy take. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and let's talk about it.
Yeah, so I went last night. I resisted, and finally I was like, all right, I gotta don the pink and like just get in there and don the pink. See, this is why nobody should call me doctor. I mess up the words. So I put on my pink. I went to see the Barbie movie, and I left feeling like something was wrong. There was just something off. Like, yeah, there's all of this like female empowerment, and I don't want to ruin the movie for anybody. So like, spoiler alert here. I'll try not to give anything away. But you go in, like, they're in Barbie land, and in Barbie land, all the women have the power, right? Like, they're the presidents. You see the female faces on Mount Rushmore, and like, there's some really interesting juxtaposition between like the world we live in and this Barbie like female empowerment land. But what struck me as interesting was that the Kens, right, the males in this world, didn't strike me as like the current females in the real world. They weren't. None of them had children with them. None of them were juggling a 9 to 5 with babies, having deep emotional conversations and friendships with one another, like coming to one another's rescues and holding the community up. They were just kind of like lingering. They were just like around trying to get Barbie's attention. And it struck me as strange for a number of reasons, because that's if that's how we see women in the real world, is just kind of like waiting to get a man or to get the attention of a man. Like that's really scary. And I think that's a scary message that I don't think was intentional, but yeah, it struck me, because the other point here is that the Ken dolls, whatever, discovered the patriarchy. They're like, oh man, in the real world, men have power. That's incredible. Like, let's be that. And they never had to give up the emotional connection, the strengths that I see that females in the real world have today. They're like, I would never give up my ability to cry in society without somebody judging me because I'm a man, or because, and so I think we really undermine two things here. One, the value and power that women have that we're not recognizing because it's not traditional, in the sense of like, it's not financial or political power. And the second thing is, I think we're really undermining the power that women have that men don't have in this society, which is the ability to have deep emotional connections with one another. It's the ability to process our emotions openly that we don't allow men to do in the society. So I don't know, that was my hot take from the Barbie movie. And it's still, I'm not trying to drag it down. There's still some great things in there, and it was hilarious. So go see it. But yeah.
I'm glad I haven't seen it. I didn't plan on seeing it either, but I thought it'd be kind of strange, a 38-year-old dude going in to see a Barbie movie by himself, because we have a 2.5-year-old, and we're not going to take the 2.5-year-old to the movie theater to go see Barbie either. And my wife would probably not be very interested. So I could ramble on that. But the messaging of a Hollywood film, this wouldn't be the first time we kind of went down that rabbit hole on this podcast, when it talks about, what is the media, Hollywood or whatever it might be, is, trying to have some sort of narrative or some sort of agenda of what they want the public space to perceive, or there's usually some of those that are kind of sandwiched in and plugged into their
Sure.
agenda there. So one of the things that we like to do on the show is kind of poke at it with curiosity and really put on our courage mask and say, well, let's really question this a little bit more. Let's really peel this back a little bit more, even more. And I love that's kind of the hat that you put on here when you went into this movie. And I think we should do that in almost any interaction that we have in our life, any type of conversation or interaction. It's just like, how could we be even more curious of like, what is the intent here? What are they trying to get accomplished here? What is that trying to, how should I perceive this possibly? Right.
I love that, Mike. I mean, one of my favorite lines to throw at people is that curiosity and fear cannot coexist. Right? There's literally no brain mechanism for it. So I study evolutionary behavior, and you think about this. You think about our ancestors, and that's how our brain is built. Like, we've got an ancestral brain. So none of our ancestors for 200,000 plus years ever had a tiger charging them and went like, I wonder how fast that tiger's coming at me. So there's literally no way for us to be curious and fearful at the same time. Our stress response doesn't allow for that. So if we can force ourselves into that curiosity that you're saying, like, well, let's poke some holes, let's ask some questions, let's explore this a little bit deeper. When we do that, we kick ourselves out of that sort of immediate judging space, that reactionary portion of our brain that says, oh, this is how it is. Those instincts, if you were.
Yeah, I love that. And, you talk a lot about fear, right? You talk a lot about stress and their impact, in our bodies and our decision making. Riff on that a little bit. When you think about fear, and how it competes with curiosity or maybe just in any direction you want to take that. What are some of the big concepts there, and how does it affect everyday life, especially in the modern world?
Yeah, I mean, our brains aren't built for this world. They're built for the world of our ancestors. So Robert Sapolsky, who's a colleague and an incredible researcher around stress, has said that our stress response is literally built for 3 minutes of screaming terror across the savannah, right? After which either the stressor is over or you're dead. Like that's pretty much it. But in modern society, that's not how we live. We wake up, the very first thing we do is we check this little device here, and immediately, we've got 50 emails and 20 texts, and we're seeing the news, and we're going, oh my gosh, what can I do? And then we get into this anxious space. So we spike our stress response, and we stay in this reactionary, fear-based thinking. And what that does is it really undermines the incredible gift that we should have for being human, right? This frontal lobe, which allows us to think consciously and cognitively and deeply about complex issues. So when we're under stress, when we're constantly, operating from fear, we're not capable of being curious and diving in deeper to problems. So I think, what you're seeing in society, your opening joke of like, I should just trust, of course you shouldn't. But of course you shouldn't, just dismiss anybody else. Like it's such a rich and deeply complex problem that we have to resolve. But what's happening, I think, in American society, at least, is we have these deeper and deeper divisions. So we've got this tribe versus that tribe, and never the two shall speak. Because again, back in ancestral times, your tribe wasn't coming over to borrow a cup of sugar. Somebody from that tribe was coming over to steal all your resources and kill you. So we've created these fractions, these tribes, these fear-based responses in our brain. And now we can't even get curious. We can't even, explore somebody else's opinion without having this, oh my gosh, I have to be right. And I can't explore any other options because that is how fear kind of, I don't know, it eliminates curiosity and possibility from our lives.
And what I've found in just my own life experiences is that the mind is, this computer, right? It says they just computer program this brain, and there's a certain capacity, and our computer runs and eventually it slows down a little bit because there's so much running. So we just go buy a new computer if this one becomes super slow. It's not like we could go, let's go buy a new brain because this one's moving so slow. So from that lens is often where I operate from, where if I feel like my operating system, my body, my emotions, just things are kind of like stuck, or I'm not able to process things the way I would, that I typically might when I'm at my best. So things are moving a little slow. I have enough cognitive awareness to say, okay, I need to settle down a little bit. I need to avoid these distractions. Let me avoid some technology. Let me go get lost in nature. Let me decompress, right? Let me sit in stillness, right? But oftentimes, most people, I would say, I can't put a specific percentage, they're going to say, let me decompress by watching TV, or let me go fill my mind with scrolling on social media, or this is how I'm going to decompress, where all we're doing is we're adding more stuff to this brain, and this computer overlaid in the system even more. So I see you nodding along. Speak to me on some of this stuff from your science background that you can bring into my like elementary school analogy that I just kind of offloaded.
No, you're killing it. You're killing it, Mike. There's two things I'll say to that. One, normally when people get into that overwhelmed space and they're like, I have to keep going. No. You need to take a nap. Like literally you need to take a nap. The science shows that if you take a 20-minute nap when you're feeling that massive amount of overload and you're like, I have to keep going, you're going to get more things done, more tasks accomplished throughout the day. You're going to have higher cognitive abilities. You're going to have more creativity, like all of the things that you're looking for. Take a nap. Even if you don't sleep and you just lay down and close your eyes and focus on your breath, you're going to get back into that reset. You can also do physiological sighs. I'll go through that in a second, but just getting your body back in line with, okay, I'm not getting chased by a hungry tiger. This is not a life and death situation, so I can stay in this conscious mode. The other thing I'll say is just a point to social media. When we're scrolling on social media, and I don't want to hate on social media. Listen, I'm on there all the time. I get it. But one of the things that I think people need to be cognizant of is that because we're such a social species, we are constantly comparing upward, right? We're looking at the person with the yacht, with the great vacation. And that's when you're posting, by the way. Like you're posting in front of the Eiffel Tower drinking champagne. You're like, yeah, life is great. You're never posting when you're scrolling in bed, like sick and sad. And like, that's when you're scrolling, right? So when you're seeing these people's highlight reels, what we feel all the time is that we're low ranking. And when we look at what that does to our stress responses in nature, being a low ranking primate means your stress goes through the roof and your testosterone, by the way, plummets. That's true for females as well. And it's just as important for females to have a healthy level of testosterone. So yeah, just be aware of the stories that are being told subconsciously as you're scrolling all that social media.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's like you're comparing your mundane existence to everyone's highlight reel. And of course, what do you share? You share your highlights too,
That's right?
So, we're all contributing to that because we're kind of crafting and managing and manicuring this image, but it's all fake, right? And it's just a great reminder that like what's really substantive, did I say it right? We'll see. We'll roll with it. It's just like, your relationships, your health, your peace of mind, right? The emotions you're feeling on a regular basis, lowering your stress and fear, increasing, you're more like your dopamine and your serotonin, reducing your cortisol. You mentioned taking a nap. You mentioned physiological sighs.
Yeah.
What is a physiological sigh? And then what are some additional I know you talk about meditation, manifestation. So if you want to get into some of that stuff as well, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for bringing me back to that. So physiological sighs are probably the most effective thing that we've found to reduce cortisol on the spot. So reduce your main stress hormone. The thing is, nobody does it. And here's why. Like you've been told since you were high, like you need to take a breath. And you don't do it because it's free, right? And people are like, well, it can't possibly be worth anything. I can just, dude, I'm going to start charging people $100 to do this because it is so powerful. But a physiological sigh, essentially what you do is you breathe through your nose as deeply as you can. When you get to a point where you can't take in any more oxygen, open your mouth and get that like that last little sip in. And then you're going to hold it for 2 counts and exhale through your mouth. When you do that, we can literally measure your cortisol levels go, which is incredible. 2 physiological sighs. Try it. If you're listening right now, just try that. You will feel a difference in your body. So that's a huge, simple tactic that, again, people don't value enough because it's free. Mike mentioned something earlier, getting into nature. So forest bathing is as it's commonly called, like get something green around you. You'll notice actually we got a couple plants in my office. They're fake. Doesn't matter. Your brain's so dumb it doesn't know the difference, right? It really actually doesn't matter. But if you have green plants around you, your cortisol will go down, your anxiety goes down, your concentration goes up. There's all kinds of really great science around that. And then meditation. I mean, listen, the first time somebody told me I needed to meditate, I was like, I'm a scientist. That's all woo woo stuff, that's out there. And then I got scientific about it and I started reading the research and I was like, oh snap, like I need to meditate. Like this is really powerful. And it was one study in particular actually that changed my thinking on it. It came out of Harvard University and they looked at, they scanned the brains of non-meditators and then they put them through an 8-week-long, 20-minute-a-day meditation program and rescanned their brains at the end. And what they found was that they actually grew gray matter. They grew brain cells in the frontal lobe and then shrunk those amygdala, that reactionary portion of the brain. So I don't know about y'all, but I need as many brain cells in the frontal lobe as I can possibly get. So I started meditating after that. And it really is a game changer in creating that space between that, that stimulus and how you respond.
Well, I want to sit here for just a moment. I know we were going to get into some really fun topics here in a little bit, especially about like women empowerment, men's, and maybe even get into some fun conversation around crows. We'll see we'll see what happens. So much for us to explore. But I want to park here for just a moment because recently I went to an event with Matt Drinkon, Front Row Dads, in December. And I had, there was a somatic breath coach there, Stefanos, who took us through a journey. And it was about 45 to 60 minutes of this intentional breathing that brought me to a whole nother dimension. And for the listeners, I've told this story maybe a couple times on the show, but so I don't need to bore with the full details. But ultimately, I went into another dimension just through breath work. And the short of it is, I had my 5-year-old self was having a conversation with my son who has never said a word before. That's the short of it. So you could go back. I don't know where I've told this story before, but then we fast forward to May. So that was December, May. That same guy came in, did another session, and he had us like jump up and down, like doing these like karate kicks and just like raising our arms in the air, almost like a jumping jack, but legs going out into the front doing kicks for about 20 minutes, cardio like up the wazoo. And then after 20 minutes, he said, put your blindfold on and lay down. And we lay down after 20 minutes of cardio and everyone was there and he just put on this blaring music. I could not stop crying. My body just completely was like reset on this like crazy journey that just went through from this ultimate high to this low, just pouring out uncontrollable, like twitching, everything just from breath work. So I went up to him afterwards. I was like, all right, I really need this in my life on a more consistent basis. And he's like, well, I charged $60,000 for 4 months. Said, all right, well, you're out of price range. So do you have like a protege or a student or something? So
intern.
Yeah. So he connected me to a guy who is a little bit closer, who's one of his protege. And I've been working with him. And so I hired a somatic breath coach since June. We've had about a dozen sessions and it has been so helpful for me to just get in touch with that like small breath that you just did. That was the first time I heard the sip. He's like, just take another little sip. So I wanted to bring the listener to that. After you get to the high, open the mouth, like Rebecca said, and take that extra sip. And then another couple of sips, as many as you can. And then bring it almost like I roll my eyes to the back of my head, to the crown, like bringing it to the crown as high as possible, to the pineal gland, that vagus nerve, bring it as high as possible. Hold it there, bring it up. And then just like he says, let it breathe out like a feather floating, let it breathe and let it settle. And he'll have me do that for sometimes 40 minutes of that, just that pattern. And it unlocks so much, but it's hard work. So my whole long rant brings it back to not everyone is going to be willing to do the work. And this work required time. It requires energy. It requires resources. It costs money. So it's like sometimes people settle into it's just not for me because maybe it's too demanding. So could you speak to maybe simple versions or modified versions or that limiting belief in itself, just to try to help the listener say, you don't have to be so extreme like Mike and do all these other things, but there are other ways that you can do some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, and this is not my quote, and I feel a little bit silly even throwing it out there because I'm sure your listeners have heard it, right? It's just choose your hard. Yeah, it's hard to do the work. It's also hard to sit where you are and not change and have to suffer through that. So choose that hard, but do it consciously. Make that choice. I think for me, hearing you, or for my own story, I'm not going to meditate 20 minutes a day. There's no way. Especially if somebody says right now, and you've never meditated before, to sit down and do 45 minutes of somatic breath work and like 20 minutes of these, there's no way. And the brain resists change like it is deadly because that's what it thinks it is. So I employ something known as the winner's effect, which is an awful name, but that's what it's called. Sorry, y'all. And it's really about, eating the elephant one bite at a time. And it works within our hormonal systems to help keep us motivated through the changes that we want to see. So I'll tell the story about my friend Charlie, who had about 200 pounds that he medically needed to lose. And he did it. And people were like, oh my God, Charlie, how did you lose 200 pounds? How did you lose 200 pounds? He's like, I didn't. I lost 1 pound 200 times. Right? It's about breaking it down to the smallest thing you can possibly do and staying consistent. And in fact, if you push him on it, he'll say, actually, I lost 0.01 pound a day because that's the smallest thing that my scale would measure. And every day I stepped on trying to lose 0.01 pound. And when he did, which he was capable of doing almost every single day, what that did was a surge of testosterone, you decrease your cortisol, and importantly, massive dopamine release, massive release of these chemicals that actually act like addiction hormones, right? And you want more of it. That dopamine, that's an addiction hormone. You're like, yeah, I want that. So it motivates you to continue the habit. So I think, Mike, to your question, it's find something that you want to change. I don't care how big it is. If it's 200 pounds or if it's, a 4-day silent meditation, don't start at the end. Start where you are and the smallest possible point where you can measure that success. And then when you get that dopamine hit, you're going to want a little bit more and a little bit more and stay consistent in it. That's how you see change.
Love that. And I think that's where a lot of people get screwed up, right? Because they say, okay, I haven't been at the gym in 6 months, but I'm going to start going every day, right?
That's right.
Or, I've had a terrible diet and now I'm going on the super restricted diet. And so, that dopamine release is really related to progress, right? It's not really related to the end result. In fact, we might get some dopamine release when we get the end result, but ultimately, it's actually the journey and the progress every day. And a lot of times when we get that result, we think it's going to be momentous, and then we just kind of go, kind of didn't hit the spot the way I thought. We just need another goal, right? So I think there's some really good stuff in there. Manifestation is something here that I know you can speak to as well. It's something we've talked a little bit about on the podcast. We've had some conversations with guests. And it's one of those, it's a little bit of a polarizing topic because some people are like, that's bullshit. Manifestation is like, some sort of pseudoscience or pseudo religion, if you will, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I guess in some ways I'm a little bit, I like to be critical and in terms of, rigorous and how I think about things. So I don't want to just swallow the secret wholesale. And also, also I have noticed in my own life that when I practice certain things and I'm thinking clearly and I'm orienting myself positively towards the good and I'm feeling good on a regular basis, that does seem to correlate with better results and getting more things that I want. So from your science background, because I know you can speak to this, talk about manifestation then and some of the things that you're seeing in the scientific literature or just, your thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, for sure. So the cool thing about this, and I'm with you, Andrew, like I have a hard time saying manifesting things because immediately my brain is like, dude, no, I am a scientist. Show me the data. But the brain is really interesting in that it doesn't understand past, present, future very well. So all of these practices around visualization, like I'm going to visualize myself on that stage, getting this gig. I'm going to visualize myself closing that sale. I'm going to visualize myself doing, like, the more you practice that, the more naturally it spills out of you as it's happening, because your brain has that muscle saying, oh, I've already done this before. I've already done this before. And so it is easier for those things to transpire. There's a bunch of little scientific, pieces to manifestation. One of it is just this effect that we see what we're looking for. And our brains are pre-programmed to see the negative, because that's what's going to kill us, right? Like, you see the tigers, you see the snakes, you see all the negative things naturally. So much of manifestation is the practice of gratitude, the practice of seeing the positives and realigning our brain to really look for those opportunities rather than only seeing threats. And that's, again, this visualization practice, this looking for those opportunities. And when we do that, we can take action, which then manifests the results that we're looking for. So I call this sparring with ourselves. So the stories, that's the S, right? Our stories change our physiology. They change our hormones, which change our actions, which change our results. So one of the more famous studies around this was done by Elia Crum. And she took identical milkshakes. I think this is just fascinating. Identical milkshakes. Now, she told this group of people, she's like, all right, this week you're going to drink the indulgent milkshake. 620 calories. My God, this thing is going to fill you up. It is going to be delicious. So, of course, everybody drinks milkshake, and no surprise, everybody reports, oh, it's so good. It's so delicious. I'm so full. The next week, they come back and they drink the diet shake, the sensible shake. It's 120 calories. It's nothing. In reality, these are the same shakes, folks, right? But what was fascinating is not just that the people, of course, thought the really rich shake was filling and tasted better. What was fascinating is their actual physiology changed. So ghrelin levels, that's your hunger hormone, plummeted when they drank the indulgent shake. So they weren't hungry, because the story they told was, I just drank a 620 calorie shake. Oh my gosh, of course I'm not hungry. I'm so full. And so their actions then changed because they didn't go out to eat, and the results then changed. So when we're talking about manifesting, it's just sparring, right? It's what are the stories that you're telling that are affecting your physiology that then affect the actions you take and the results that you get. So that's my hot take on manifesting. I think so often, it's this woo-woo, if I just sit back and I believe that all good things will come to me. No, dude, you got to take action. But that story is the first part. So that's how I see it.
I really love the acronym SPAR, because I was curious. I was like, I wonder what the letters are going to stand for. So, because I have a framework stemming from the Tony Robbins framework with his potential, the human potential. And it's a similar, like a little diagram of where things kind of start and unfold. And I mentioned this on Brent Perkins' episode. So listener, if you want to go back and listen to the framework I talk about in that episode, but I love the acronym. I think the stories that we're telling ourselves are the truth, right? That's our truth. And frankly, that truth gets anchored into some sort of action, and we act on those truths. So we sometimes need to be intentional with the story that we're telling ourselves, and that self-talk, what's influencing, what's allowing ourselves to get influenced. And frankly, that's why the circle of influence, being very intentional with your tribe, who you surround yourself with, who you're following, how you're feeding your mind. Are there books, are there podcasts? And if they are books and podcasts, whose books and whose podcasts are you listening to, right? So also community, who you're surrounding yourself with, like-minded individuals, or misery needs company. So and this kind of ties into where I wanted to go, which under this women's empowerment movement, because we've had some guests on the show that are very much women empowerment. But when a man hears that, it's almost like the Black Lives Matter thing, where it's like, when we say Black Lives Matter, we're not saying everyone else, doesn't matter. We're just saying this one. Now, I don't want to go on that whole tangent, because, we could go in a lot of different directions, but just those three words is all I'm approaching. Just like women empowerment doesn't necessarily mean men disempowerment. We had Connor Beaton on the show, and he has his book called Men's Work, and same thing. It's like men empowerment doesn't mean women disempowerment. In fact, he said opposite. It's like, by the men doing the work to become better men, it's in turn helpful to the women in our lives, raising our daughters and our sons the right way so we can have positive change. So I'd like to kind of move in that direction a little bit, where these stories, the circle of influence, surrounding yourself around messaging when it comes to what the marketplace is telling you or feeding your mind around what women empowerment is, a feminist movement, what it is and what it is not. Why don't we jam on this a little bit?
Whew. All right. Well, I was really excited to tell you. I have to tell you this one thing, and then we'll move into it. That a recent study just showed that 15%, you are influenced 15% in productivity based on who sits within 5 feet of you. So, like, your high performance people, surround yourself with them. Whether you're listening or reading. All right, let's talk women. So I find it very interesting what you're saying about, men feeling excluded from this conversation. And I think we've created another one of those binary issues where there doesn't need to be one. For too long, I think we've said, okay, we're going to cheerlead women into the traditional areas of power, which are, leadership, politics, finance, like get them up into those CEO positions. Well, then where do you guys go? That's my question. What we haven't done is we haven't created that same cheerleading effect to say, oh, by the way, men, you're just as valuable when you're stay-at-home dads. We haven't valued women's work, as it were, in a way that allows men to maintain their status and still step into those roles. So I think what we've created is this system where men feel in competition with women that are stepping into their space. And we haven't given them an opportunity to feel just as valued and just as status driven outside of the workforce.
What do you think is the biggest kind of interesting dynamic then around this current? Because like relationship with the sex is it's tenuous. It's probably been better in the past, right? What would you say is like what's really underlying that, and in your opinion, what would you say?
I mean, I think it's what I just said. I think it's that we're not cheerleading men. We're not. We're cheerleading women, which I think is great, and we need it, by the way, right? We need that. We need seats at the table of power, of traditional power, but we also have to create value and status for men that isn't aligned with their job titles or how much money they make. Because again, this is an alignment with evolution. So you think about what men are valued for evolutionarily: their strength, their power, how many women they can recruit. It's a numbers game. We can go there if you want. But for women, it's the opposite. A woman, gosh, I'm going to just go there. A woman can have sex with 100 men. She can only have one offspring. So for women, it's about quality. So what are women looking for in men? Well, they're looking for status, size, dominance. Who can bring home the bacon, literally, right? And so traditionally, what has ended up happening is that's what men have been valued for, whereas women are valued for chastity, for parental assurance, for raising the offspring. And so you bring those sort of evolutionary biological values into the modern world, and there's these massive clashes because those power struggles don't align with where we are in the modern world.
Well,
thanks for that. I agree, and I think it's just fascinating to kind of hear your take. So thank you for that, Mike. Go ahead. Sorry,
I'll kick it back to you in a second, but I've toyed with this for a moment, and I've never actually voiced this to anyone. I don't know if my wife will hear this episode or not, but this is hot off the press. So I've actually thought this through. I'm on this very awesome trajectory in life with business and money, and we're doing really great, and things are awesome. And I started to contemplate, like, what if my wife got like crazy famous and she became the provider for the household? What might it feel like for me to step away from a lot of the things that I have been working towards in my purpose and direction to step into the role of being the caretaker of the home, so that way she could let that light shine and chase that purpose. And it didn't really sit great, because like
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks
I,
for your honesty.
I
Yeah.
really, because I know my wife really well, in the sense of there might be a time where she wants to really check that purpose box, and at the same time, not even a but, like at the same time, I have a really important purpose box. And naturally, from the studies that I know, like being a masculine man, being guided by purpose is one of the highest priorities in my life, that it almost might feel emasculating for me to compromise my higher purpose and settling for something that is alternative to that. Even though it might be a righteous thing to do, it might not feel right. And that would also in turn potentially create conflict in the relationship. So it is kind of like a nuanced conversation that I've had with myself. Just not that I would ever need to make any decisions around it, but maybe there's something there for you to unpack. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's huge. And thank you for your vulnerability there. I think a lot of men, I've asked this question to men before who are, high power, high status, and they're stressed because the jobs of entrepreneurs, of leaders, of men in these roles, like they're stressful, they're tough, they're not easy. And I'm like, how many of you would love to be a stay-at-home dad? And everybody's hand went up. And I was like, how many of you would love to be a stay-at-home dad if you go to the bar and you see your buddies and they're like, hey, what are you doing these days? And you have to say, oh, I'm a stay-at-home dad. And everybody's hand went down. And I think that's the meat of it. And you touched on something very important there. You said it feels emasculating because we as a society have set up male value to be, what do you make? What do you drive? What do you like? That is what you are valued for. And actually, when you look at the science of it, erectile dysfunction is really common among men whose partner earns more than they do. There's higher levels of anxiety, higher levels of physical manifestations of that. And so, there's biology that supports that kind of thinking. So it's a challenge. I'm not here saying like you shouldn't explore that option, because I feel like your partner deserves that chance to fulfill her purpose as well, if it's not staying at home. And this is a modern jungle.
Is there science behind what I mentioned about the purpose? So not that the status didn't land fully with me. There's a piece maybe, but I think the majority of what I was alluding to is is there science that backs that a masculine man has this attraction to purpose as like a hierarchy of needs that's a little bit more so than a woman? Or is there not evidence to back that up? Is that truth, or is that hearsay?
That's interesting. That's interesting. It's something that I'd have to dig into, to be completely honest. Like I don't want to blow smoke for your listeners. I'd want to have the hard data in front of me. I can make a hypothesis about that. My guess is no. My guess is yes, to some extent. Men are more driven to achieve, but what's behind that, sort of at the subconscious level, I'm not saying this is true for you, Mike, but the subconscious level, it's a status thing, it's an ego thing, because when you are valued, when you've created something that's really valuable that people look to and go, wow, he really did things that bettered the world. Even, it can be an unselfish purpose, but it's still like he's the man, like he did it. That's a massive attraction for mates, for money, for the things that we value men for.
I could see that. I could see there should be in truth that is still an egoic need that's trying to be checked potentially. I think there might be something there.
And I mean, there's ugly sides for women as well. Like women are valued for their beauty, their youth, their reproductive value, right? So you want to know why beauty is I forget what it is, like a 55 billion, probably much bigger than that industry. Like women are injecting themselves with all kinds of things to try and hang on to their value. It can be ugly. It can be really ugly. So yeah, I mean, I turned 40 this year, and I'm kind of like, ooh, I'm hitting that number where society is no longer to think that I have anything to offer. I don't know.
You're maternal geriatric now, according to the terminology.
Gosh, I know. I know. Geriatric pregnancies and stuff. It's crazy.
What a compliment. I was
Oh.
going to say, yeah, when my
I'll take
wife
it.
turns 40, I'm going to tell her, hey, you're maternally geriatric.
Geriatric,
Congratulations. I was going to say
There's,
you don't look a day past 29, but Mike
wow,
clearly
thank
has it
you.
right in the, yeah.
What a compliment. And here's the thing. Actually, there's some real freedom to it, though. Like I will say, having been not 40 before, having lived all through the actual youth of being a woman, there's always this question of like, am I here because they see me as some reproductive value, or am I here because I actually have something to say? And I actually are they paying attention to me for the right reasons, kind of thing? And the more I age, the more I'm not turning any heads. And like, there's great freedom there because I'm like, oh, I'm here because I have actually something to say, and you're paying attention to me, not because you're looking at any part of me, but because there's something of value coming out of my mouth. And that's a weird thing, but I have a friend who, when she turned 50, she's like, it was the weirdest thing. Nobody pays attention to me anymore. Like, no one. I walk into a room and I'm invisible. And she's like, at first it was awful. And now I'm like, this is the most freeing thing ever. And I think especially as women age out of that, like, I have to show up beautiful. I have to put on the makeup. I have to look young. And they just start to accept that, okay, well, look, I'm old now and I'm past reproductive age. So I'm not trying to attract new mates to have offspring. There's this like newfound freedom in that. I call it something vulgar, so I probably won't say it, but it's like the F at 40s, the F at 50s. Like, whatever.
Well, it's all right.
Now
You can
get
say
me.
whatever. We
Yeah.
had Jen
Good.
Vera on the show talk. She must have said
Oh.
cock heart connection 12.5 times. So.
Ooh, good. All right. Well, there you go. I call it my fuck at 40s.
There you go.
Yeah,
I'm in my fuck at 40s. Yeah.
I like it. And since we're going there, I figure we might as well just go full send and see if we can't get canceled here today. Yeah, I'm curious now. I'm half joking, but the feminism in general, right?
Yeah.
I think Mike and I mean, we haven't like sat down and wrote our manifestos on the topic or anything like that. But I think we largely probably have similar takes, which is essentially some version of we're all for female empowerment, treating the sexes as equal, etc.
Yeah.
What we don't love so much, is kind of this newer wave of just like, and fuck men, right? Men
Yeah.
are worthless. A woman needs a fish, man like fish needs a bicycle, and essentially kind of this the more toxic side, let's say, of it.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your take on feminism in general and the state of it. You obviously strike me as somebody who is all for cheering on women in society, and obviously you are a testament to female empowerment personally. You're the embodiment of it in many ways.
Thank you.
And also, what's your take on the second half of what I said? So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I immediately think of this interview I heard of Dolly Parton, who I think is a feminist icon, frankly. I think she's a feminist icon. And a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that, and we can have a whole another conversation on that. She shows up exactly who she is, knowing what her strengths are, plays to the system, and does it so damn well. I mean, she's incredible. But you ask her if she's a feminist, and she's like, oh, hell no. Oh, absolutely not. I love men. And I think this is where this it comes down to semantics often. Like, I don't think of feminism as being something that takes away from men, and any more than I think, women's empowerment is a piece of the pie that men no longer get. And I think that way of thinking is really, really harmful because, frankly, women are never going to close the pay gap. Women are never going to close the leadership gap. Women are never going to close the labor gap at home. All of these things that we talk about being problems for women, we're not going to do it without men. Like, we need to empower men as much as we are empowering women. And I think what's happened is, again, this divide, this fear-based divide, where you got to pick a side. Like, either you're pro women or you're pro men. And it hurts all genders. It hurts all genders because the men don't feel heard. Like you're saying, I how can I show up and be helpful to women if I feel like I can't open my mouth without, mansplaining, or I feel threatened that somebody's going to call me out for being just me. So, my take on it is that the more we can empower men and the more we can empower the powers that the feminine have, of like, listen, guys, you can change a baby's diaper. Like, we need to put freaking changing tables in men's bathrooms, for God's sakes. Like, why are we overlooking that? We're doing all of this work to help women feel comfortable. Why aren't we doing the same for men in the home? So I think men are an essential piece of the conversation, and overlooking them or undermining your needs. Like, again, we've cheerleaded women into sort of the masculine side of leadership. We haven't done the same to cheerlead the feminine side of men. Like, when was the last time that Mike just said he just bawled like a baby, which is awesome. And I'm so freaking proud to hear that. But when are we actually not picking on men as being the dumb husband, or the one who can't change diapers, or the ignorant one about anything that's in the house, or those are really harmful narratives. And we've got to get rid of those if we want to make any progress as women.
And that's one of the reasons why we love the Front Row Dad community, for this reason. Huge. Because we definitely speak a lot to this and empower each other and through this, because we want to be better men, better dads, better community leaders, and better husbands. So that way we can create space for women to thrive that are important in our life. I did have a curiosity, though, on the needs for women, though. I think it's important for us to actually sit there for just a moment. I know there are needs from the needs for, again, I'm a huge Tony Robbins fan, 7-time firewalker, went through a lot of his programs, and the need to feel safe, seen, and understood. And there are these needs for the feminine. That doesn't necessarily just mean for women, just the feminine inside the male also has the need to feel seen and understood and safe. But that is a dominant inside of women in a lot of cases. And we had a whole episode with Elizabeth D'Alto on just safety specific. So can you just speak to these needs that these women, I'm going to use the word need again because I can't think of the best term, but what are the needs that women need to have in order to thrive? And how could the men support in creating the space for those needs to exist? And then what are the second part B of that would be, what are the fears that a lot of women have around not getting those needs met?
Man, that's a big question. Look, I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to speak for women. I can't. I can speak for me, and from my experience, what I need safety wise, and I think for culturally. I don't know. I'll speak culturally for women. In terms of safety, I think one of the biggest milestones we could achieve is educating men around the freeze response. So we talk about fight and flight all the time. Have you guys heard of the freeze response before, just out of curiosity? Okay, that makes two. Most of the time when I talk, people are like, what's the freeze response? What's that? Women and men react to stress differently, right? So 70% of women in a stressful event freeze. And often it looks like this, right? You're sitting there and you're smiling. And here's where massive problems occur, especially in cases of sexual harassment and sexual assault, is a woman feels uncomfortable and she freezes. And so she's staring back at you and she's smiling. And men, biologically, your brains are literally programmed for sexual overperception, which means you think that girls are into you a lot more than they are. Not trying to say anything bad about y'all. I'm sure everybody wants you, but that's just literally how you're programmed. And so what ends up happening is you've got these two conflicting biological drives. And so I think probably the biggest, most important thing for women to feel safe is having men understand what a freeze and appease response looks like. And often that is literally me staring at you smiling when I'm feeling really uncomfortable, when I physiologically cannot move, I cannot fight back, I cannot escape, I cannot run away. And that can be a really, really dangerous situation because, we teach women all the time, well, don't drink too much and go out with your friends and make sure you're carrying, your keys a certain way to go to the car. And what we're not teaching men is like, hey, don't do that shit. Also, watch for this. And if you're seeing that, or you're seeing that with one of your buddies and another friend, like go up and pull your buddy aside. Make sure just check. I think physiologically that level of safety for women is huge, because so often I think it's hard to be empathetic about a woman's position walking through the community, because guys, you've never had that. Like you've never walked late at night or gone for a run and had to think, oh gosh, I hope somebody's not sneaking up to kidnap and murder me, like, or rape me in the van, and so having an empathy, an awareness that these are anxieties and stressors that women carry with them all the time. That's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, and totally agree. And it's like from a physical perspective, right? Maybe when I get older, but I've literally almost never felt vulnerable, right? In a physical situation. It's not like
Right.
There's obviously people who could beat me up. Let's be honest. I'm not exactly like, like a UFC fighter over here or something, but it's like short of, Conor McGregor coming up to try to kick my ass in the alley. Like, I feel like I could at least fend for myself. And it's like, women feel overpowered by men, obviously physically. And so then it's a fear in the back of their brain. I mean, my wife was at the grocery store and she texted me and she's like, some guy, checked me out, right? Whatever. And I think, I was joking with her a little bit later. I was like, hey, good for you. You still got it, But in addition, she's like, but he looked a couple times. He saw us with little kids. I got super nervous because like they probably prey on that. And it's just like me going to the grocery store. I like got my earbuds in and I'm like walking in super. It's just I'm in my own world, right?
Right.
Would never think to even worry about my surroundings much. So it's just a great point. I love the way you said it, freeze and appease, right? Where it's like this placating the person to just like, hey, how do I avoid this situation? But because even if I said something verbally, if I've heard I said something verbal to say I'm uncomfortable, maybe that actually escalates the situation. So,
exactly.
Is that accurate?
Yeah. No, the number one response that men have to rejection is anger. So look, like I'm a 6 foot tall, strong, athletic woman. But I know that me up against any man physically, like, I can hold my own to an extent, but I know that I'm likely not faster and I'm likely not stronger. And that sucks. Like, that's a very vulnerable spot to be in. And so evolution has done us this, I'm going to put this in air quotes, favor of saying, hey, your best way to survive this kind of dominance, this kind of attack, is play nice. Just shut up, smile, appease, try and maneuver yourself out of the situation. And unfortunately, that's a physiological response sometimes that women don't recognize in themselves. And so when an assault, for example, occurs, they may go back and then re-victimize themselves, going like, why didn't I run? Why didn't I scream? Why didn't I do all of those things? When in reality, like, that is evolution protecting you. That is your brain going, this is how we survive this. And it's super unfortunate. So thank you for giving me the platform to talk about that a little bit.
Well, I will say that sometimes men miss those cues and they're not as in tune as some other species. Like one species in particular that doesn't really miss cues often would be a crow. So a crow would not really miss a cue. In fact, a crow is such an intelligent species that they'll like drop their food on the crosswalk so the cars run over it. And that way they can walk and get the food.
You've been studying my birds?
That they're some of the smartest creatures. Unlike men, sometimes we miss the cue. So tell us about this this species called crow that is so fascinating to you before we head to the 3 questions.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that transition has got to be the best of all time. So I studied crows for a decade. This is the weirdest trajectory of my career, right? I was an ornithologist. I worked at Cornell's Lab of Ornithology. I had a dedicated phone line that people would call in, ask me questions about crows. That thing rang off the hook, y'all. Because crows, if they ever grow thumbs, like opposable thumbs, look out. They will take over the world. They are so freaking smart. They recognize human faces. like for years. So if you're bad to a crow, they will pass that information to their offspring, who will then mob you. And if you feed crows, exact opposite. Like, they are crazy smart. And they're tool using. We actually had a camera. Oh gosh. All right. So quick story. This guy was setting chipmunk traps up with peanut butter and sunflower seeds. Short story is that he's not catching any chipmunks. He's like, what's going on? We set up a camera. One of our crows comes up, sets off all the traps, goes around, eats the rewards. Like, these guys are not dumb. So don't mess with crows, y'all.
I love it. There was actually a bunch of crows on my house when I got home the other day. And so I was just like, looked it up. I was like, what's the crow spirit animal meaning or whatever? Because I was like, which is like super, super cheesy. Like, that's the opposite of scientific, right? But,
I mean,
and they have a bad rap.
About, like,
bad
transformation. And, yeah.
They do get a bad rap.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, I mean, we could hang out with you forever, but I also want to be respectful of your time, Rebecca. So we always ask our guests 3 questions towards the end of our episodes. The first question is, what do you think the world needs most today?
I think the world needs most today more curiosity. I think, my whole shtick is around being fearless. And I don't talk about like, be fearless, like jump into the cage of the hungry tiger. I'm talking about fearing less. And fearing less is all about being cognizant of the fears that are coming up. And so when we get curious, we can actually dive in and say, oh, that's what I'm feeling. This isn't about, you being a man or you having different color skin than I am, or this is about, oh, I see. So I think the world needs more curiosity. Yeah.
I love that response, and I appreciate that. Our second question: what do you recommend as far as books? What do you think? Maybe 1 to 3 books you think people should read?
Display A. Oh, I can't. There we go. No, I don't want to plug my. I mean, I will plug my own.
You'll
book.
plug your own book at the end. I probably should say.
I'm very proud of it.
Of course.
I mean, that book for sure. I would say Glennon Doyle's Untamed is probably at the top of my list, and I say that it is very, very popular for women. I want men to read it too. I think it is so incredibly powerful to get different genders' perspectives on her work. So Glennon Doyle's Untamed would be my choice. And then of course you can't go wrong with any Tim Ferriss books. Like Tools of Titans is epic. Yeah.
I love it. I haven't checked out Untamed, so I'm actually not familiar with this. I will check that out. That's a good one. It's a new one for me. So thank you.
Good. Awesome. Enjoy.
My third question is, what does it mean to you to be better than rich?
Better than rich. I think everything is better than rich. I mean, I think there's a richness in freedom, in the ability to wake up every morning, in better than rich. Gosh, what does that mean? I think it's an appreciation of all the things that you do have. Is the juxtaposition of saying, I want this, I want that, towards gratitude, towards gratitude. So I'd say better than rich is the gratitude that we have for what we have. That's better than rich.
That's a great answer. Dr.
I was going down 6 different rabbit holes there.
Good.
So.
Dr. Rebecca Heiss, I am sure people are going to hear this conversation, or just Rebecca. They're going to hear this conversation. They're going to be like, wow, her personality is infectious. Her responses are intelligent. I'd love to stay in touch with her. I know you have your book, Instinct.
Yeah.
And I know you have other resources that are available for with the Fearless program. Can you kind of speak to some of this? I mean, your landing page is awesome. I know you got 52 weeks of content. You got a lot of really great resources there. So where could our listeners stay in touch with you? What would you say, and what you're working on and how we can help?
Yeah, sure. So the easiest place to go is just my website, which is RebeccaHeiss.com. You can find me on all the socials at Dr. Rebecca Heiss. And then what you're talking about, Mike, is my Fearless program, which is this year-long experience, or you can do it as a 6-week, 50-day accelerator experience. And the Fearless program is all about identifying who you are now, who your ideal self is, and then taking away all of the barriers that stand in the way. like bringing those two pieces together. So it goes through, identity, stress, anxiety, fear of rejection, fear of failure, confidence building, imposter syndrome, manifesting for scientists, like all of these really important pieces to allow ourselves to optimize our brains for better. And my encouragement is that your listeners go check it out and then sign up with their friends. I'm actually putting a deal out where you can buy this program with up to 10 friends for one price. And that's the goal for me is always to create community and conversations, because I think we're always better when we're accountable in communities toward one another. So yeah, that's the Fearless program. You can find that at drrebeccaheiss.com or on my original website. Just go check out my courses and you'll find all that content. So.
That's great. Excellent. Thank you for giving that to our listener. I mean, if you're listening to this and you feel like you could use a little bit of extra little juice when it comes to some meditation and some practices and overcoming anxiety and becoming fearless, I think this is a great resource. And of course, the book Instinct, I'm sure they could find it on Amazon. Go directly to the website. Find Rebecca on social, Dr. Rebecca Heiss. Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing value today and speaking your authentic truth. And Andrew, as always, thank you for your insights and questions. And listener, as always, thank you. Thanks for joining us on our podcast. If you are listening, then please make your way to YouTube for your next episode. We have a lot of extra bonus features and shorts and extra things that we do on YouTube. You can see exactly how 6 foot tall Rebecca looks, so that'd be great. Look what a 29-year-old Rebecca looks like. I got to recover myself or something, there. But anyway, thanks so much for joining in, everyone. And as always, remember, leave today better than you found it. Till next time.